The rain hadn't stopped since morning. It wasn't the kind of rain that washes things clean. It was the kind that lingers, heavy and cold, as if the sky itself refused to move on. Inside the funeral hall, the air smelled of lilies and silence. The mahogany casket in front of me looked too perfect, too polished, for the man who'd spent his life fixing things with his own rough hands. My husband, Jonathan, was gone, and I was the only one standing beside him. The rows of empty chairs looked like accusations, each one whispering the same question. Where are they? Our children, Michael and Claire, the same kids we sacrificed everything for, were nowhere to be seen. Michael had texted the night before, "Sorry Mom, in Dubai for business. Can't change the flight." Claire didn't even send a message. I found out through her social media post. She was at a beach party, laughing with friends, while her father's coffin was being lowered into the ground. I should have cried, but the tears had dried somewhere between heartbreak and disbelief. The funeral director stood awkwardly near the door, pretending to check his watch. The pastor, who had never met my husband in life, spoke about a good man and a proud father. But I barely heard a word. All I could see were those two empty seats, one for my son, one for my daughter, like ghosts haunting the room. When the service ended, I followed the casket outside. The cold wind slapped my face, but I didn't flinch. I watched as the casket disappeared into the ground, each thud of dirt sounding like a heartbeat slowing to silence. I whispered softly, "I'm sorry, Jonathan. You deserved better." Then I turned and walked away, alone. Back home, the house felt like a museum of our life. His slippers were still beside the recliner, his glasses resting on the nightstand. The television remote sat exactly where he left it. Everything was frozen, except me. I moved like a shadow through the rooms, not sure what I was searching for. Maybe answers. Maybe strength. Out of habit, I checked my phone. I wish I hadn't. Michael had just posted a photo, him shaking hands at some luxury event, captioned, "Big deals, bigger dreams." And Claire, she'd uploaded a story from her yacht, champagne glass raised, smiling beneath the sun. The timestamp was exact, the same hour her father's coffin touched the ground. Something inside me cracked. Not with tears, but with clarity. For years, I'd protected them from every consequence, made excuses, handed over money, and ignored the growing distance between us. But at that moment, standing in the silence of my empty living room, I realized something final had also been buried that day. Not just my husband, but the illusion that our children still cared. I walked to the old oak desk in Jonathan's study. The one where he'd always paid bills, kept records, planned our life together. My hands trembled as I touched the surface. Beneath the desk lay a small drawer with a label that read "Important Contacts." Inside, among old receipts and insurance papers, was a single card with a familiar name. Attorney Miles Owens. Our family lawyer for over 20 years. I stared at the number, my reflection faintly visible in the glass of the photo frame beside it, a photo of Jonathan holding our newborns with a proud smile. That image used to fill me with warmth. Now it only burned. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it should. I dialed the number slowly, each tone echoing like a heartbeat. When his assistant answered, my voice was calm, controlled, almost cold. "This is Mrs. Harper," I said. "I need to make an appointment immediately. I'm changing the will." A pause. "Of course, ma'am. May I ask what kind of changes you'd like to make?" I looked at the photo one last time. My husband, my children, our perfect little lie, and whispered under my breath, "Everything. I'm changing everything." That night, sleep refused to come. The storm outside had eased, but inside my chest it raged louder than ever. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing Jonathan's voice echo from 1,000 yesterdays, calm, steady, full of warmth. "No matter what happens, Evelyn," he used to say, "family is worth every sacrifice." I once believed that. I built my entire life around it. We both did. We worked, saved, endured every struggle for them. The same children who couldn't spare one day to say goodbye to their father. When dawn crept in, the house looked different. Not physically, everything was still perfectly in place, but the silence had changed. It no longer felt like grief. It felt like truth. A truth I had refused to face for years. I poured coffee into Jonathan's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle. He always said it brought him luck. My reflection in the kitchen window looked older, harder, a woman shaped by too many compromises. I whispered to that reflection, "You gave them everything. Maybe it's time they feel what nothing looks like." As the coffee steamed, I walked to the living room and opened the drawer where we kept our family photo albums. The first picture on top was from Michael's graduation, Jonathan standing proudly beside him, tears in his eyes. I flipped to another, Claire's wedding day, a ceremony that drained our savings but filled Jonathan's heart with joy. He'd said, "Look at our girl, Evie. We did good. Did we?" I turned the page and found a photo of Jonathan in his hospital bed, holding my hand, smiling through the pain. That was the last picture ever taken of him. I remembered the sound of his breath, shallow but calm, and the way he squeezed my hand when I promised him I'd take care of everything. At the time, I thought he meant bills and paperwork. Now I understood he meant justice. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Michael. "Hey Mom. You okay? Just saw some posts online about Dad's funeral. Sorry again I couldn't make it. Let's talk next week. Things are crazy here." Next week. I stared at those two words until they blurred. I wanted to scream, to send him a photo of the empty pews, to remind him that his father's next week never came. But instead, I just set the phone down. Some silences speak louder than words. At noon, I dressed carefully. Black coat, black gloves, the kind of calm armor only grief can forge. I called Attorney Owens again. His assistant said he could see me that afternoon. The drive to his office felt longer than it should. The city moved around me, people laughing, rushing, living, all unaware that a woman inside a dark sedan was rewriting the fate of her family. When I arrived, Owens greeted me with the same kind smile he always had, the kind that used to comfort me. Not today. Today, I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. "Eliza," he said gently, "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Miles," I replied quietly, taking the seat across from his desk. "But I'm not here for condolences. I'm here for action." He adjusted his glasses. "You mentioned changes to your will?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Jonathan and I plan to split everything evenly between Michael and Claire. But that plan dies with him." Owens frowned slightly. "I see. May I ask why?" "Because they didn't just skip a funeral," I said. "They buried their father long before he died. With every missed call, every ignored message, every time they needed money but never gave love." He was quiet, letting the words settle. "You're certain?" "Completely. I want it all transferred into a trust, for someone who still remembers what family means." He tilted his head. "And who might that be?" "My grandson Liam," I said softly. "He's the only one who called every night during Jonathan's illness. The only one who came to mow the lawn when I couldn't. He's 21, still figuring out life, but he has something the others lost, a heart." Owens nodded slowly, writing notes. "Understood. I'll prepare the draft. But Eliza, this will cause tension. Are you ready for that?" I smiled, not the kind of smile that shows happiness, but the kind that comes after too much pain. "Miles, I buried my husband alone. There's nothing left they can take from me." When I left his office, the sky had cleared. The world looked almost bright, almost alive. For the first time in months, I felt the smallest trace of peace. Because this wasn't vengeance. It was correction. That evening, as I sat in Jonathan's recliner, I whispered into the quiet, "You said to take care of everything, my love. I'm doing that now." The house remained still, but I could swear I heard him in the silence, a breath of approval carried by the wind through the half-open window. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The air was still, almost too still, as if the world was holding its breath. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space where Jonathan used to sleep. His pillow still carried the faint scent of his cologne, cedar and rain. I pressed my fingers against it and whispered, "You'd have hated what I'm about to do, but maybe it's the only way they'll finally learn." By 7, I was dressed, sharp and deliberate. I didn't look like a grieving widow anymore. I looked like a woman on a mission. I opened the drawer again, the one marked important contacts. The business card still sat there, slightly yellowed at the edges. Miles Owens, family attorney. This time, I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number and waited. "Good morning, Owens and Associates," his assistant said cheerfully. "Tell Mr. Owens it's Eliza Harper," I replied. "And I'm ready to make the changes." There was a pause, then a softer tone. "Of course, Mrs. Harper. He'll see you at 10. The drive felt shorter this time. Determination has a way of folding distance. I parked outside the brick building that smelled faintly of rain and old books. When I entered, Miles stood immediately, his face creased with both sympathy and respect. "Eliza," he greeted. "Please, sit. I've gone through your file. You and Jonathan were always meticulous with details." I nodded. He believed in order. He thought that if you planned enough, nothing could go wrong. Turns out, what goes wrong isn't in the papers, it's in the hearts. He folded his hands. "Tell me what you'd like to change." I took a deep breath. "Everything goes to my grandson, Liam Harper. Not a cent, not a single possession, goes to my children." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't speak. He'd seen enough families to know when a mother's voice carried no hesitation. "You're certain?" he asked finally. "As certain as I was when I said I do," I replied quietly. "My children forgot who raised them. My grandson remembered who loved him." Miles leaned back in his chair. "Then we'll establish a trust in Liam's name. He'll have access under clear conditions, education, medical needs, or once he's 30. That should protect him from interference." "Good," I said. "And make it so his parents can't touch a dime." He nodded. "Of course. But you know they'll contest this after you're gone." "I know," I said. "Let them. They've been fighting for money their whole lives. Let this be the last fight they ever lose." For a while, neither of us spoke. The quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when justice starts to take form. Then he said, "You know, Eliza, not many people have the courage to do what you're doing." "It's not courage," I answered. "It's consequence." He began drafting the new document while I sat in that leather chair, watching the rain streak across the window. Every sound, the scratching of his pen, the ticking of the old wall clock, felt like punctuation in a chapter of my life finally closing. When he slid the papers across the desk, I didn't hesitate. My signature came out steady, each stroke cutting clean through the weight of the past. As I stood to leave, Miles said softly, "You know, Jonathan would be proud of you." I looked at him, a sad smile tugging at my lips. "I'm not sure about that. But maybe he'll finally rest knowing I didn't let them bury his memory with their greed." Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The sun broke through the clouds, weak but persistent. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the cold, damp air, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, peace mixed with power. Back home, I poured a glass of water and sat at Jonathan's old desk. In front of me lay the old will, the one where everything was shared between Michael and Claire. I looked at our signatures at the bottom, side by side. Two people who believed family would outlive fortune. Then I reached for the lighter Jonathan used to keep for his cigars. I flicked it once, watched the flame catch the corner of the page. The edges curled inward, blackening slowly. I didn't burn it out of anger. I burned it for closure. When the last piece of ash fell into the tray, I whispered, "Rest easy, my love. I finally kept my promise." But even as I said it, I didn't realize that the decision I'd just made would ignite a storm far greater than the one I'd survived. Because secrets like these, they don't stay buried for long. For 2 days, the house felt like a quiet secret. I moved through it lighter, freer, as if every step no longer had to apologize for loving children who had stopped loving back. But peace never stays long when money is involved. The first crack came through a phone call. "Mom." It was Michael. His voice, smooth, polite, but rehearsed, dripped with the kind of tone that always came before a request. "I heard you met with Mr. Owens." I froze. Only 3 people knew about that meeting. Myself, the attorney, and his assistant. "And how would you know that?" I asked. He hesitated. "Claire called me. She said one of her friends from Owens's office mentioned it. You're making some changes." I almost smiled at the irony. They hadn't shown up for their father's burial, yet suddenly they were curious about the paperwork. "Yes," I said simply. "I made some adjustments." "What kind of adjustments?" he pressed. "Personal ones." "Mom, don't do anything rash. You're emotional right now." His tone changed, soft but manipulative, the same tone he used when he wanted to borrow money for another investment. "Let's talk. I'll fly out this weekend." "You didn't fly out for your father's funeral," I said quietly. "No need to come now." The silence on the other end was sharp. "That's not fair," he said finally. "You know how busy I am." "No, Michael," I whispered. "I know how important you think you are." He hung up. An hour later, Claire called. No greetings. No condolences. Just, "Mom, what are you doing with the inheritance?" "The same thing your father and I always did," I replied. "Trying to put it in the right hands." "Whose hands?" she snapped. "Michael says you're cutting us off." I could hear the panic under her anger. Not grief. Not guilt. Just fear of losing comfort. "You both cut yourselves off long before I did," I said. "Mom, please. This isn't like you." "You're right," I said. "It's the version of me your father would have wanted. The one that finally stopped being blind." There was a pause. Then she said something that made my hand tremble. "You're losing it. Maybe you shouldn't be making legal decisions right now." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They'd already buried their father without a tear, and now they were ready to bury my sanity if it meant keeping the money. When the call ended, the silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't empty, it was electric. The calm before the storm. By evening, headlights flashed across the driveway. Through the window, I saw Michael's sleek black car pulling in, and right behind him, Claire's white SUV. For the first time in years, both of them were here, together. Not for family, not for love, but for what they thought they were about to lose. I opened the door before they could knock. "You came fast," I said flatly. Michael forced a smile. "We were worried." Claire crossed her arms. "We just want to understand why you're doing this." I stepped aside, letting them in. "Then by all means, try to understand." They sat across from me, like strangers in their own home. The same couch where they'd once built pillow forts and fought over cartoons now felt like a courtroom. "I'm not crazy," I began. "And I'm not acting out of grief. I'm acting out of memory. The memory of every hospital visit your father waited for you. The memory of every missed call you never returned. The memory of him asking, "Do you think they'll come this weekend?" And me lying, saying you were busy because I couldn't bear to tell him the truth. Claire's lip quivered. Michael looked away. "Mom!" I raised my hand. "No. You had your chance to show love when it mattered. Now, I'm showing consequence." "So it's true," Michael muttered. "You gave everything to Liam." "Yes," I said simply. "Because he earned what you wasted, time. He gave your father what money can't buy, presents. You can't just erase us." Claire shouted, her voice breaking. "I'm not erasing you," I said softly. "I'm rewriting what love looks like." Michael stood up, furious. "You'll regret this. We'll contest it." I looked at him. This man I once cradled as a baby, now a stranger drowning in greed. "You can try," I said. "But all you'll prove is that I was right." They stormed out, the door slamming behind them. Through the window, I watched as they argued in the driveway, their anger bouncing off the cold night air. When the taillights disappeared, I sat back down, exhausted but calm. Outside, the roses Jonathan planted were swaying in the wind, fragile, yet still standing. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, raised it slightly toward his photo, and whispered, "You were right, my love. Sometimes family isn't who shares your name, it's who shares your heart." The storm had officially begun, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. The next morning brought a silence that wasn't heavy anymore. It was thoughtful. I made breakfast for one, just as I had for weeks, when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a name that, for once, didn't make my chest tighten. "Grandma." It was Liam, his voice soft, hesitant. "I found a few of Grandpa's old books in the attic. Thought maybe you'd want to see them." For the first time in days, I smiled. "Bring them over, sweetheart. And come hungry. I'll make something decent for lunch." By noon, he was on the porch, tall, shy, and carrying a cardboard box filled with worn paperbacks. He set them on the table carefully, like they were treasure. And in a way, they were. Inside were Jonathan's gardening journals, his favorite mystery novels, and a notebook filled with half-finished ideas for a memoir he never got to write. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where Jonathan used to read the morning paper while I made coffee. Liam picked up a notebook and flipped through the pages. "He wrote everything down," he said with a small laugh. "That was your grandfather," I replied, smiling faintly. "He believed nothing should be forgotten. Not the work, not the lessons, not the love." We ate lasagna and talked about everything. His studies, his part-time job at the bookstore, his plans for graduate school. He spoke with the same quiet sincerity that used to define Jonathan. When he talked about his dreams, there was no arrogance in his voice, just purpose. At one point, he looked down at his plate. "Grandma," he said softly, "I feel bad. I know Mom and Uncle Michael aren't visiting much. I don't want you to think I'm here because of that." I placed my hand on his. "I don't," I said. "You're here because you care. That's what makes the difference." He nodded, his eyes glistening. Grandpa always said that showing up matters more than saying the right words. I swallowed hard. He was right. And you're proof of that. We cleared the dishes together. As he wiped the counter, he told me he was applying for a research scholarship, something he'd dreamed of for years. "But it's expensive," he admitted. "I'll manage somehow." "How much?" I asked. He hesitated, then told me. The number made me smile. It was nothing compared to the money his parents had wasted on luxury vacations and failed ventures. "Apply," I said firmly. "Grandma, I can't ask you for that." "You're not asking," I interrupted gently. "You're giving me a reason to believe again. Do you think your grandfather and I worked all our lives just to watch our savings gather dust? No, Liam. We saved for moments like this, for people who still understand what it means to earn something." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he whispered, "I'll make you proud." "You already have," I said. When he left that afternoon, he hugged me the way Jonathan used to, strong, wordless, real. I watched from the porch as his old car rattled down the driveway, a small cloud of dust following behind. The house felt different after he left. Not empty, alive again. I walked to Jonathan's study and opened the drawer where the new will was locked away. For a moment, I touched the envelope's corner, the ink of my signature still dark and fresh. I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. Because I hadn't acted out of spite, I had acted out of clarity. That night, before bed, I found one of Jonathan's journals in the stack Liam had brought. On the last page, in his slanted handwriting, he had written, "Love is proven not by what people say at your funeral, but by who shows up." I closed the notebook slowly, tears finally falling, quiet, steady, unashamed. The next day, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Claire. "Mom," she said, her tone clipped. "I heard you're helping Liam with some scholarship. Are you sure that's wise?" I stared out the window at the rose garden Jonathan had planted, their red petals glowing in the morning sun. "Yes, Claire," I said calmly. "I'm very sure." "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "He's just a kid." I smiled faintly. "Because, my dear, that kid showed more heart than either of you ever did." Before she could respond, I hung up. Not out of anger, but because the conversation had already ended years ago, the moment she chose a yacht over her father's farewell. Outside, the wind stirred the roses. They bent but didn't break. Neither would I. And as I stood there, the weight of betrayal that had haunted me since the funeral finally began to lift. Not because justice had been done, but because kindness had found a new heir. 3 days passed after Liam's visit. The house had settled back into its familiar rhythm of quiet mornings and long evenings, but something in me had changed. For the first time in months, I wasn't haunted by the silence. I was learning to live inside it. Then, one afternoon, the storm I'd been expecting finally arrived. Michael showed up without calling first. His shiny black car slid into the driveway, too polished for a house that smelled of soil and age. He stepped out wearing a tailored suit, but his face looked tight, uncertain, like a man rehearsing a kindness he didn't truly feel. "Mom," he said, opening the door before I could reach it. "We need to talk." I nodded toward the living room. "Then talk." He looked around the space, eyes landing on the framed photographs lining the shelves, the same ones he hadn't looked at in years. "You've changed things," he said. "Yes. And some things needed changing." He sat down, avoiding my gaze. "Look, I know we haven't been around much. Claire and we've been busy." I smiled faintly. "Busy is one word for it." He sighed. "I made mistakes, Mom. I should have been at the funeral. I know that. But Dad always understood." I interrupted quietly. "Your father didn't understand neglect, Michael. He understood excuses." He winced. "You're angry." "No," I said. "Anger passes. This is truth." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Claire's worried. She says you've cut us off completely." "I haven't cut you off," I said softly. "You just stopped being connected." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He looked around the room again, his eyes landing on the old clock Jonathan had built years ago. "It still works," he murmured. "It does," I said. "Because your father fixed it every time it stopped ticking." I paused. "That's what he tried to do with us, too." Michael's eyes shimmered briefly. He stood up, his voice low. "Maybe it's too late to fix anything." "Maybe," I said, "but it's never too late to try." That evening, as if the universe wanted to test that statement, Claire called again. Her voice was softer this time. "Mom, I've been thinking. About Dad. About everything. Thinking is a start, I said gently. She hesitated. Liam told me you're helping him with his project. He seems so happy. I didn't even know he was working on anything like that. You never asked, I said simply. Silence stretched between us, uncomfortable, but real. Can I come over tomorrow? She asked finally. I paused, then said, if you come, come as my daughter, not as a lawyer-in-waiting. I understand, she said. And for once, I believed her. The next day, she arrived without makeup, without her husband, without the perfume that usually announced her before she entered a room. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, nervously twisting her fingers. I don't know where to start, she admitted. Try the truth, I said. She nodded slowly. I was angry at you for changing the will. But then I realized I was more angry at myself. Because you were right. I didn't deserve it. Not the money, not the house, not even your trust. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I was with my friends that weekend, she continued, laughing, pretending I was fine. But I wasn't. I just didn't want to face what losing Dad really meant. It was easier to ignore it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I hate that I didn't say goodbye. I reached across the table, taking her trembling hand in mine. Then say it now, I whispered. He's still listening, just from a different place. Her sob broke the silence. For the first time in years, my daughter cried without shame. I held her hand until she steadied. Later that afternoon, Liam stopped by to return one of Jonathan's journals. When he saw Claire, he froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. She looked at him with guilt and something close to awe. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. You showed up when we didn't. Liam smiled gently. You don't owe me anything. Grandpa loved you. Grandma still does. That's enough. Watching them, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. Fragile, flickering hope. As evening settled, I stepped outside to the garden. The roses Jonathan planted were beginning to bloom again after weeks of withering. Their petals unfolded slowly under the fading sunlight, as if nature itself was reminding me that even things once neglected could bloom again. That night, before bed, I wrote in my journal, something Jonathan had always encouraged me to do. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what hurt you. It means remembering without hatred. I closed the book and smiled to myself. The storm that had once threatened to destroy what was left of my family was beginning to clear. And in the quiet after the thunder, the first seeds of redemption were finally taking root. The following Sunday morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window for the first time in months. The house no longer felt like a monument to grief, it felt alive again. I made coffee for 3 instead of 1. Liam was due to arrive soon, and to my surprise, both Michael and Claire had texted asking if they could come too. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find all 3 of them standing there. Michael held a small bouquet of roses, Jonathan's favorite. Claire carried a homemade pie, clearly nervous. Liam, as always, smiled warmly, his presence grounding the room. Come in, I said. The kitchen filled quickly with small talk and awkward laughter. It was strange, watching them together again after so long, like watching strangers try to remember a forgotten language. But then, slowly, something shifted. The ice began to melt. Michael asked Liam about his scholarship, genuinely interested this time. Claire offered to help him organize a fundraiser for his research. They spoke softly, listened carefully. For once, nobody looked at their phone. Nobody rushed to leave. After lunch, we sat on the porch where Jonathan used to read every evening. The rose bushes were in full bloom, the air sweet and still. Liam leaned forward. I've been working on something, he said. A project in Grandpa's memory. He handed me a folder filled with sketches and notes. I want to turn the cabin into a small community library. Somewhere kids can read, seniors can meet, where people can connect. Just like Grandpa used to say, a quiet mind is the richest place in the world. I felt my throat tighten. Jonathan had said those exact words countless times. I looked at Liam, then at my children. Michael nodded slowly. That's actually a great idea. I could help with the permits and construction. Claire added, and I can handle outreach, donations, local sponsors. I know people who'd love to support something like this. I looked at both of them, stunned, not by their offers, but by their tone. There was no greed, no argument, just sincerity. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The wind moved through the roses, carrying the faintest scent of rain and memory. Finally, I said, "Your father would be proud of you all right now." Michael's voice trembled. We weren't there for him when it mattered, but maybe we can still honor him this way. That night, the four of us sat together in the garden, watching the sky turn from gold to violet. It wasn't perfect. There were still unspoken apologies, still gaps that time alone couldn't fill, but there was something new between us. Peace. Over the next few weeks, the plan for the Jonathan Harper Community Library took form. Michael visited every weekend, rolling up his sleeves to help with repairs. Claire handled social media, organizing volunteers and book drives. Liam oversaw the vision, leading with quiet humility. I watched them work together, and for the first time, I didn't see division. I saw reflection. My husband's patience in Liam's eyes, his determination in Michael's posture, his kindness in Claire's voice. On the day the library finally opened, the whole town showed up. The shelves were lined with donated books, and at the center of the main wall hung a framed photo of Jonathan smiling beside his rose bushes. Beneath it, a plaque read, "For the man who taught us that love is shown in presence, not possessions." As people filed in, laughing and reading, Michael stood beside me. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on us." I smiled through tears. "I almost did. But your father wouldn't have forgiven me." Claire joined us, her arm around my shoulders. "He's here, you know," she whispered. "He always said love never leaves a house, it just changes rooms." Later that evening, after everyone had gone, I walked back to the roses outside the library. The petals glowed softly in the dusk, their color richer than ever. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's done, Jonathan." They came home. And for the first time since he left, I felt no ache, no emptiness, just peace. Because this wasn't just the end of grief, it was the beginning of legacy. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments where you're watching from Globe Showing Americas. Remember, love isn't proven by words, but by presence. If you believe in second chances and family redemption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story so more people can feel its message. Because sometimes, even broken families can bloom again. Rose.